If we can, maybe we'll finish up this chapter tonight. Looking at the last two paragraphs, we'll just read it through and then try to do our best to explain it. Good and wise friends, freedom from means free from what? And thought means thought of what? Freedom means a mind free of any trace of duality and one free of every mental defilement. Thought, brackets thus freed, is thinking that comes from one's true and ultimate original nature. This being thus true nature is the essence of thought, and thinking is the functioning of this being thus true nature. Such thinking is activated from the true reality of the essential nature's true being. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue cannot think. Rather, it is from the essential nature's true being thus that thought arises. Without it, the sense organs and their corresponding forms and sounds would scatter and break down. This particular section in Chinese is very difficult, very terse and dense, and we wrestled with it quite a bit to try to translate it. I think if you come at it from the bigger perspective and then go down, I think in essence what the Sixth Patriarch is saying here, he's gone through this false separation that the chapter started between the idea of concentration and wisdom as being two separate things. He's saying they're not two separate things, they function complementary. Concentration is a state of wisdom, wisdom is a state of concentration. When you're in a state of wisdom, you are balanced, even, unmoved, but responsive and making the right choices and decisions. And in concentration, you are alert and aware. One is not a withdrawal from the reality, nor is it a hyper response to reality, but it's completely meshed so that you're functioning completely with things as they really are. And more importantly, you're functioning from a base, your true nature of you being truly as you are, what he calls the essential nature. So in a sense where he's ending up here, he's saying, just to be clear, I wasn't talking about some metaphysical abstract state of nirvana that's removed from the world of things, nor am I talking about a shutting down of the mechanisms of human functioning, of speech and language and thought. But I'm talking about a wonderful functioning. I'm going to use this word, miaoyong, a wondrous functioning of this nature, released from the impediments and infringements we put upon that through confusion and through attachment. So he says, once you free up yourself from confused thinking and attachment, then that nature, that essential nature, is non-dual with the larger reality. They're one and the same. And so that's why he says, no trace of duality. He's saying that when you're in this state, therefore you can function unimpeded, free-flowing, totally responsive, totally right on, totally appropriate to what the conditions, shifting conditions bring about. And therefore, the samadhi or the concentration is within the living human condition and our day-to-day lives and not removed from that. And in fact, that's the only field of wisdom we work within. We don't work in some transcendental. And so even if you say there's a transcendental, it has to manifest in and through the human condition, in and through human actions. That's where it's seen, that's the only field we operate in. Everything else is illusion. And so he says, on the other hand, of course, it's a field that will give you feedback immediately. You could pretend, and he does this many times, that you have this wonderful transcendent wisdom, and you can even talk about it. But whether you have it or not manifests in how you deal with the myriad things as they come, how you deal with what confronts your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, and what you make of that. So here at the end where he's going, he's saying that the six sense organs, I'm jumping around a little bit, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue cannot think. These are organs of contact, of reception, but they don't interpret, they don't act as consciousness. They're merely portals for data or information that goes into a discriminating consciousness that makes sense of them, attaches to them, discerns, and so forth. When functioning well, there is no attachment to this. There's reception and awareness, but without grasping, attaching, and identifying with these and saying, this is me, this is mine. So he said, that is the wonderful functioning. When there's attachment, when there's duality, this is not me, this is mine. Duality means also between this world and another world. Or he says, for example, don't look for Bodhi outside of this world. It's right within this. That's the duality and non-duality he's talking about. So as long as you're in that state of seeing the mind and its functions as being non-dual, it works fine. But as soon as you set up, then he says, everything breaks down and scatters. So he's saying the sense organs are not a problem. In fact, they're probably not just okay, they're probably good. It's good to have the sense organs because they give you the full field of functioning of the mind, and it allows you to then work fully and well equipped. It's how you use them that turns them into whether they're working with this thus nature, he calls it, this thus being, or they deviate. So one way to look at this, and when he says thought that is freed up in that way, thought is thinking that comes from one's true and ultimate original nature. Now, again, you don't want to think of this original nature as some sort of internal space or organ or even essence. It's not. It's about a functioning. It's about a functioning of this potential manifest through our actions. When it's clear, unencumbered, undisturbed, it is the original nature in its true function. It's the Buddha nature. It is wisdom. It is prajna. That same functioning, turned or twisted a little bit, turns it into something else. But everything manifests from this basic nature. So it's how you use it rather than say it's a pure essence someplace, and then I have to get to someplace away from defilement in order to keep it pure. That's what he means by non-dual. Non-dual means it is one single nature, and it manifests accordingly to how we use it, how we function with it. So he says, this being thus, and this is a translation of true nature. We use thus because it's used a lot in translations, but, what does it mean? Being thus being. It sounds great, but it's like, well, it just means as it really is, as things really are. So when you say things are thus, it means that's just how they are. It's not a question of interpretation or a slant or a perspective. It is seeing things unaffected by any of that mediation. That's how things really are. And being thus yourself means that you are totally in tune with and aligned with and functioning from that essential nature. And that means your being in this way is not being that or being this. You could say, well, we could say it's being this or being that. It's not. They say being thus. Because being that is to be on one side and being this is to be on another side. It's taking a position or a view. But being thus is to take neither of those and to just absorb and see and be in the presence of things as they really are and in the nature of your own as you really are. What does that mean? It doesn't mean necessarily as you are presently functioning, but it means as you potentially have this unobstructed functioning potential working. So being thus means you are fully operative or working within that true nature, which he says, how unexpected, it doesn't come or go, it doesn't lack anything, it's whole and complete, and its function is to know and understand everything. This is how he describes it. So then he's saying, so thinking that comes from there is good. It's okay. It's natural, if we want to use that word. And it's also what you would say wushang, markless. It's not marked by a this or that. It's just thus. How would this manifest? One way you'd see it perhaps is in the sutras. The sutras, I'm not wrongly guessing, I think, required some thought. It's not like they just manifested like rain coming down. They were thought. They were put forward through words and language by sages, by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So obviously they're thinking, right? I mean, but what's coming out is thus thought. Thought that is thus. It's not partial, it's not one-sided. It is thoughts that's leading to complete and total wisdom that doesn't have any partiality. So it's thus thought that comes from their natures being thus. They're able to think and express in that way. And you see later in the lively encounters, there's a lot of back and forth going on, a lot of language and a lot of thinking on the part of the disciple, or the student that comes, and on the part of the teacher who's responding. It's not like he sits there in total nothingness and says, our school is no thought, no marks, no dwelling, nothing whatsoever. And people come in, could I ask a question? Nothing. No. And you could say, well, he asked a question, he didn't say anything, that was an answer. Well, yeah, maybe. But you'd have to be enlightened to get that answer to begin with. Because a no answer would mean that you could perceive something in the no answer, which we probably can't. So he responds, he answers, and each one's differently. This is thinking coming from the essential nature. This is his thinking responding. And it's very appropriate, it's right on. But each one is different. To someone, he sort of gets them a little bit on, I noticed you didn't bow. Your forehead really didn't go all the way down. It was like I'm here. And he said, I'm going to look at that. He's thinking, he's responding, his eyes see it, but his interpretation is not like, oh, you're showing disrespect to me. See, that would be duality, partiality. He's just saying, no, what I see in that is your nature is held back by a little bit of pride and arrogance. And so he's using it therapeutically as opposed to personally. This is one way to think about the thought. Then the thought is freed up to see things as they really are, not to project and insert your own thoughts, feelings, wants, and desires, but merely to see things as they really are. That allows him to respond in a therapeutic way of saying, as long as you have that, you won't be liberated and you won't get the real, true meaning of Dharma. And so it's in a sense, you could say it's a little bit of a scolding, but it's also just a prompt. It's a therapeutic touch that then causes. So I just point out that if you read a sutra or you see these encounters, what you're seeing is thus being true nature thought working, functioning. Okay, so that's all it means. You don't have to mystify this beyond as thinking it's some abstract. When we say the thus come one, Rulai, some people think that's another Buddha. It's not. It's just a title. It's an adjective, actually, or an adverb, describing one who has arrived in this state of being thus, your true being. And when you arrive there, you are thus being, and when I arrive there, I'm thus being. And that's why often masters who really have arrived there, when they meet each other, they just say, well, hey, thus. And they say, thus. End of conversation. When my teacher encountered Venerable Master Hui Neng, they kind of looked at each other, sized each other up, however they do that, and Hui Neng says, thus it is, and my teacher says, thus it is, and that was the end. It was over, and then they just went their own ways to teach differently. So it's not a game. This is not like a rhetorical game or something like this. Those that have it know they have it, but they don't advertise it, because why would you? Then you would not be thus anymore. You'd be this or that. And those that they encounter, they can see if they have it or not. And if they have it, there's nothing more to say. It's not like, thus, should we write a book together? No. It's like, thus, go out and spread this. So everybody's thus. And if they're not thus, then you work on it. If they're thus, leave them alone. Why would you bother to bother someone who's thus? And you see some of these encounters, you see, they're coming in and all of a sudden they have a little back and forth. And you say, I didn't get it. And they say, well, see ya, bye, and they're gone. And wait a minute, what happened? There was nothing to do. It's like going to a doctor and you're not sick. Don't waste the time. Don't go in there. And the doctor, if the doctor's wise and, not trying to get a lot of money to buy, a Mercedes or something, says, you don't need to see me. Get out of here. So this is the kind of where you see this working. When they respond, it's totally appropriate. And when they don't respond, it's also appropriate. But this is this is presented to you not as an abstract state of attainment, but rather a realization of profound functioning. And I think in this you also see what's going on with a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is a being who is enlightened thus, in this way, awakened in this way, who then goes out to awaken or liberate or untie others in this way. And therefore, because they know the route, they can set up all kinds of expedients to get there. But if they don't know this route, if they're not coming from the thus being, then what might be an expedient could turn into another obstacle. Even though it looks like it could be an expedient, it's not necessarily. Food could be an expedient. Music could be an expedient. Scolding could be praise could be an expedient. Only if rightly applied to bring about that thus result. If it doesn't bring about, if it brings about attachment or affliction or wrong thinking or anything like that, it's not expedient. So this is how he then describes this as free-flowing. And then he goes on, he says, good and wise friends, this thought flows from the essential nature's true reality. Now this thought he's talking about is this true functioning, this true, you could say this thinking might be a better translation. Thinking like this flows from your true nature. And though the sixth sensory faculty, see, hear, feel, and know essential, this essential nature is not affected by the myriad sensory states. Now, affected means not that it doesn't receive and is receptive. Affected means turned by, off-centered by, moved off-center by. It's very different than saying it is not aware of the 10,000 things. That's not what it's saying. It's saying it's not affected or moved by the 10,000 things off this center. Why? Because the 10,000 things are basically of a piece. They're level and equal. They're like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows. Yes, they're there, but there's nothing you can buy into, attach to, or identify with, or make you or mine. So you're there in the midst of that, but nowhere are you grasping and attaching to that. That means you're unaffected. But as soon as you think, this is I like, this I don't like, this I want, this I don't want, this is mine, then the six sense organs have formed attachments. But the funny thing is they haven't really formed attachments because they can't. So it's illusion upon illusion because it's mine, but you can't. You know what I'm saying? It's like attachment is not real because you can't attach. There's nothing you can attach to. There's nothing in our experience that isn't constantly changing. So what is it? You think you're attaching, which is the wrong thought. This is the true nature twisted now and thinking I got something. Scientifically speaking, you can't attach to anything. That doesn't take religion out of it. You say, no, I can't, but me. Well, this thing is also nothing you can cling to or attach to. Go ahead, try. Try. I mean, people really try to cling to. I've been trying to cling to my youth. It's hopeless. I try to cling to my hair, it keeps falling out. Even if I do transplants, and it's going to hurt, those will eventually fail too, right? I could give up my dental plan, but my teeth are still going to rot. It's like, where is it that I can attach to? And you think, well, it's funny. It's like we try, but it's like we are so superstitious, and yet we think we're rational people. I do this all day long. My clothes, my house, my everything is part of my support system. And what is it supporting? There's nothing that can be supported. It's really funny. It's like trying to catch bubbles. I'm going to get those bubbles and put them in a jar and save them. Well, good luck. So the idea that we attach is really a misfunctioning. This is called avidya. In Sanskrit, avidya. In Chinese, wuming. And it translates wrongly, I think, as ignorance. It doesn't really mean ignorance. It means we don't see things the way they really are. We don't see thusly. That's avidya. It's actually vidya from like video, right? Everybody knows video? Now, what do you think video is? What's a video? Yeah, right, okay. So video is Latin for to see. Video, to see, video, the eye see. Avidya is not seeing things, it's seen wrongly. So the Sanskrit avidya means not seeing things clearly. Now, interesting, this is not a scolding. When someone says, you suffer from avidya, it's not like you're to be blamed or you've made a transgression. It's cognitive. This is really important to understand the distinction. It's merely saying your cognitive functioning is off. You are not seeing things as they really are. You are, in fact, denying things as they really are and substituting something in its place. An illusion, a fantasy, a dream. For example, if one were to see one's body as it truly is, you would see that it is like every conditioned thing, has a time of coming into being, a time of relative stability, a time when it starts to break down and fall apart, and then you don't have to look too far to realize, and it might soon be gone. Because my parents once had that, and they're gone, and my grandparents had, and they're gone. So eventually, I too will go in this way. Now, that's seeing things as they really are. Avidya means you don't accept that. Now, it doesn't change its reality. This is really interesting. You can fight it tooth and nail. It's still going to, birth, aging, sickness, death, gone. Okay? And you can fight it to the last breath, which is kind of sadly humorous, I guess. But it doesn't change the reality. The thus being reality is that's the nature of conditioned dharmas. The body's a conditioned dharma, blah, blah, blah. Avidya means you substitute something else in that place for that. You either say, I am going to beat this game. I am not going to get sick in old age and die. I'm going to get the best health club thing in Berkeley. I'm going to eat organic, natural, 100%, blah, blah, blah foods. I am going to put on these special creams. If worse gets to worse, I might do some liposuction or some, what is that injection you do? Botox, yeah, Botox. And I'm going to make a lot of money and invest it at UCSF or MIT or someplace, so they'll come up with a gene fix that'll keep all my genes from going bad. And that's called avidya. In other words, you're not taking things as they really are, but you're fighting and resisting them. Or you can go the other way. So you say, well, I guess that's the way. I'll just go out now and kill myself. That's another form of avidya. So it's replacing the reality of things for something as a substitute that is confused and not seeing things clearly. It's really important to understand avidya because some people use it as a hammer and they say, oh, you're stupid or you're ignorant. That's not the meaning here. Actually, it means you're not seeing things clearly. And the effect of avidya means you suppress, deny, or ignore the real nature of things and you present something else in its place to hold. And the clinging to that view, is called the entrenchment of wrong thinking. And so avidya becomes an entrenched way of thinking. It's not just a passing thought. It actually becomes habitual, and it leads to klesha. So this is very, theoretically, it's really important. Where does klesha come from? Where does the negative emotions, the fears, the anxieties, and so forth come from? They come from, ironically, replacing things as they really are with this vision, superstition, myth that you've created, which then fights the nature of reality, which leads to tension and conflict in the way things go and flow. So avidya becomes extremely important, and it's the absence of avidya that's in true seeing. So you take the A off of it, and it becomes vidya. Okay, it becomes seeing, it becomes knowledge. And so this is prajna, or jhana, is the opposite of this. It's actually seeing things as they really are. Okay? Clear? Questions? Yes?
I wonder if focusing on the word thinking and thought isn't confusing somewhat. At least I'm finding it confusing. Because it's kind of hard, for me at least, to distinguish between right thinking, wrong thinking, thought that is... it seems to me that maybe if you're focusing on the true nature, the essence of thought, isn't that something underneath or behind thought, or something? Isn't it more like awareness that we're really talking about here? It just seems like thinking can be so many things. It can be language, it can be images, it can be smells and sounds. It's just, it seems to me that none of that is really what they're really trying to get at here. it seems to me it's something underneath that or behind all of that. Do you see what I'm driving at there?
It can be, and this is where it becomes very, if we say behind it, or what did you say?
Behind it or underneath it.
Right, we're back to duality.
Yeah.
And so then you have this pure thing, and then you have the myriad ways it can do.
Yeah.
Rather than behind, it's within. It's right in
It's
and
within.
through.
Yeah, I think I like that better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in and through all the myriad things that we do. It involves sight, sound, smells, taste. It involves images. It involves imagination. It involves memory and reflection. It involves language and symbolic structures of icons and imagery and so on and so forth. All of that is included in thought. And so it's not saying there's one that's pure and there's one that's not pure. It's saying in the functioning of all these myriad forms of consciousness as it works in its functions, it can actually work to align with and to liberate because it's coming from a non-attached, non-projected use and function, or it can entangle and ensnare and get you caught the other way. So it's not a toggle switch, an either on or off, but it's not the shutting down of thought or trying to purify the thought. It's simply unobstructing that natural functioning from anything you lay over the top of it. That's why it says, let your mind be unattached, clinging to nothing. Let it be in that state, because as soon as you move away from just letting it be to set up something, you then turn that could have been, say, a wonderful liberating image into an image of attachment and emotional grasping and so on and so forth. So that's why there's nothing that can't function to illustrate this nature, and there's nothing that can't function to, distort it. So this human consciousness, when rightly used, creates Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, totally functioning, liberated beings. Wrongly used, it creates serial killers and, monsters. And the whole 10 Dharma realms are functions along the spectrum of that use or misuse. And so again, thought is the only English word we have, and I try, every time I do this, I'd say we'd have to add a footnote and say thought is not just abstract cogitation.
Right.
It is the full functioning of human consciousness and all its myriad expressions and forms, including all of the emotions.
I think that's a real problem here, for me at least, because since the words here seem to be focusing on thought as a concept, that leads my, Western mind directly towards the thought that we've all learned to train as a tool for us to act in the world.
And it includes that.
And it includes that. I think.
But you're right. Our association with that, since thought was never introduced to me that way, since basically Descartes on, we separated this out, the mind, body, thought, feeling, blah, blah, blah. We created this duality, which is the opposite of what he's talking about here. Since we have done that, we actually don't have a single word that can express all this.
Right.
I am guessing, and I don't think it's wrong, that when his audience hears this, they know that he's referring to the full apparatus of human consciousness, of which this word thought is one way of taking everything under an umbrella that includes all of that functioning. And they don't locate it in the brain. Okay? It is an interactive, and as you could say, what's the word is, it's a distributed function. It's not here. It's not here. It's a distributed function of human consciousness. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, with the six sense organs and the consciousness that's forming. This is like, whoa, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about, I think. What's it? Cogito ergo sum. That's Descartes, René Descartes. René Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. The Buddha probably would say, I think, therefore I think I am. A little different play on it, because it's a working of a functioning that is much broader and much more inclusive than just because I think I am. So we're stuck. We're stuck with language, and the only thing we can do with this is to try to explain it when we do things like this to try to put footnotes or do lengthy introductions to try to take this apart. But it's a fullness of our humanity that's being discussed here, not just one function of our mind, thoughts or planning or ideas. And therefore you could see why it matters, because in fact, most of our troubles don't come from abstract ideas. Now, that isn't to say they're not important. Abstract ideas can lead to something like the Holocaust, okay? So they do have a chain here. You start with wrong idea, and you go down a road, and pretty soon that idea manifests as a policy to eliminate a whole group of people. It started as an idea. However, most of our problems are coming from our emotions, our feelings, our sensory apparatus as we're working through things day to day, and our emotions and feelings around that. So if that's not being included here, this is a very limited teaching. Yeah. But if it is being included here and you go, well, wait a minute, wow, that's interesting. It's not talking about my abstract idea about what I want to write on my essay. It's talking about how I feel about you, how I feel about you, how you feel about me, how I feel about my job, what stirs when desire and lust and anger arise in me. That's thought. Oh. So if you want to get to it, then that movement of consciousness is thought. Whether it moves for an image, whether it moves for a sensory object, whether it moves for an idea, whether it moves for a feeling, whether it moves into a blanked out oblivion, that's still thought. Wow. So that's what's being discussed here. That's why it says everything is made from mind alone, made from this functioning. You could say there's an outside there, but we don't know that outside there except through the mind's functioning. So whatever it is, we can't know except through this device by which we know the human mind. So you can't separate inside and outside. They become a continuum, an interactive reality rather than a dualistic one. Wow, okay. So we finish here. Therefore, the Vimalakirti Sutra says, and I read you a passage from the Vimalakirti Sutra last time, remember? This is the one where who's sitting in the forest? Winnie the Pooh is sitting in the forest. No, yes, it was Shariputra. And Winnie the Pooh was thinking about honey. That was a false thought Winnie the Pooh had. But then Winnie the Pooh made the discovery. He said he went after the honey, and he climbed the tree, and he climbed too high, and the bees came, and he fell, boom, to-boom, 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 into a gorse bush. And he got all prickly. And he was experiencing dukkha, the first truth. And he had the insight. He says, it all comes from liking honey too much. Okay, now we're back to Shariputra. Shariputra was the one in the forest, not Winnie the Pooh. And he was scolded by Vimalakirti for sitting in a still oblivion. In other words, a stillness that shut off this full functioning that is being talked about here. This is why the Sixth Patriarch likes to quote this text. And he says, one who can skillfully discern the characteristics of all dharmas, the marks of all dharmas, remains solid and firmly grounded in the deepest truth. In other words, he's saying, skillfully discern the nature of things as they really are. If you can do that, you're grounded in the truth. You're not grounded in the truth if you're infatuated by things as they are, infatuated by what you think they might be, nor are you grounded in the highest truth if you pull away from and ignore them. But you discern them right in the midst, right within, you see things as they really are, walking, standing, sitting, even lying down. This is that wondrous functioning that he's talking about here. So the important thing I think to take away from this is, first of all, it's talking about the human, what's immediately available to us all the time. All the time. We are in states of mind, states of thought, states of emotion and feelings. This is how we function and move. Whether we use it in a totally liberated, unattached way, or we bind ourselves up, that's the only difference between a Buddha and an ordinary person, is that functioning or that use of that. But the capacity is equal. My teacher has a really neat verse I'll try to recite. I don't know the Chinese. But in the verse, he's trying to describe this wonderful functioning and the non-duality. He didn't write very much, actually. There's a couple pieces that he wrote. Most of his writing is poetry, and most of his commentaries that were spoken. He wrote a couple of things, but mostly all of his writings are not essays or long treatises or dissertations, they're poetry, and this is one of his poetries. In the poem, he says, he's describing the state of a fully awakened being. And he says, in this state, it goes like this: the Dharma realm is my body. In other words, that being's body. The Dharma realm, the whole nature of reality, all Dharma realms, meaning the 10 Dharma realms, but the whole universe, if you want to say, is my body. And there's nothing outside of that. Empty space is my function. Everything fits within. So my field of operation is empty space. My body and my substance is the Dharma realm. So this is like boundless, open. Empty space is not empty. It contains everything. So this is what it's saying. There's nothing outside of this. That's the first line. Dharma realm is my body, nothing outside. Empty space, my field of operation, my function, everything's inside. The myriad things, the myriad phenomena are of a piece. Let all discriminations go. Beyond where words can travel before a single thought comes forth. This is the verse describing this wonderful functioning. So I share that with you. Lastly, tonight, I'm going to get to one more question that came up online. Maybe there's no more? Good. Okay, so this one, going back to this, interesting, kind of fits in. We were talking about the earlier thing of no thought, or freedom from thought, yet having thought. And then we described that as emotion as well. So you could say freedom from emotion. Doesn't mean you don't have emotion, it just means you're not affected in turn by your emotions. So your emotions are tools, but they have to be, again, like thoughts, if you want to use that distinction, properly used, or they become impediments. So the question is, how does karma fit into this? Karma affects negative emotions. This is the question or the statement. How does one use negative emotions as a tool for bodhi? So there's a lot of different layers of questions in here. How does karma fit into this? I guess the question would be, how does it fit into freedom from thought? And if you look at what karma is, it's intentional action. It's not just action. So intentional action means action that is thought, intended, for it to be karma. So an act by itself without intentionality is not karma. Okay? So just be clear. The Buddha said to the bhikshus, he said, I say to you, O bhikkhus, satana karma, or satana action, with either body, speech, or thought or mind, is what I call karma. In other words, intentional action of words you intend, of speech, but even intention of nothing spoken or said creates karma. It's the intentionality that gives it its inertia, gives it its momentum. Okay? So if karma, how does karma fit into this? Then you could say with every intentional action driven by greed or anger and avidya, let's use avidya because that's a word we use tonight, and greed would be thirst, craving, and anger can be everything from mild irritation to outright hostility and violence, a whole range of things. Intentional actions, where your intentions are driven by those three, then create what is called karma. But then karma, everybody use. I know it's like, I should be happy because like karma is a word that's been adopted into English now. So yay. But the bad news is it's like totally misunderstood. So karma doesn't just mean what you do, which a lot of people think. And karma doesn't mean what happens to you only. It's both and neither. Karma actually is a three-tiered process. There is karma, which is intentional action called cetana. C-E-T-A-N-A. So intentional action is the first, cetana. This leads to the next phase, which is called vipaka, which means ripening. And then the third place is phala, which means fruit. So intentional action, with all the variants that would surround that action, then sets in motion a process of ripening and maturing of that action with its results or effects or consequences, which then eventually manifest as a fruit or a retribution. Now, the fruit and the retribution is called karmically neutral. In other words, it does not generate further karma. It's only the result playing out. Once that's played out, it's gone. Unless, of course, in response to that, you generate more. Okay, so people have to understand, so karma is not interminable. It plays out, the fruit of karma plays out and it's over. So in every moment, you're in the process of receiving fruit, for well or woe. Let's say tonight being here is good fruit. Okay, so you're here tonight, that's a result of some intentional good action. What happens after you leave here, I can, but it might not be so good, and then that's the other. But any moment you're in, you are in the moment of all three. You are intentionally doing things with body, mouth, and mind. You are in a process of ripening, although you probably don't know where, you're not aware of it unless you're really quiet and sitting a lot and kind of getting in tune with that process. And you're in the process of reaping fruit, phala. And it's happening in the present moment at all times. So that's what karma is. Karma isn't just action or what's happening to you. So emotions can arise. Let's say this is part of vipaka and phala. Negative emotions, powerful negative emotions arise. These have seeds. Okay? The way you would get at it is you, first of all, acknowledge that the emotion has arisen. You don't deny it and repress it and blame somebody else. You make me angry. No, I'm angry. That's a difference, okay? And so you then use that moment to say, okay, here is perhaps a fruit of something, and perhaps it's a ripening of something, but at the intentional ground, the only place I can work, I can deal with this and stop at this point and not just keep going with it. So you go back to intentionality and say, okay, I acknowledge this, I recognize it, here it is, it's anger, it's jealousy. It's very powerful. It doesn't mean you're going to get rid of it immediately, but by quietly, and this is what meditation helps you do, quietly observing this, you get to isolate it, from a complete taking over of you, and you can see it as something you might be able to get a harness on. You might be able not to turn it into words and actions. Okay, so you pull back two of the three karmas. And then how do you get it out of the mind, out of the system? You begin a process of unraveling it, untying it. And so this is the next question is, how does one's negative emotions work as a tool for bodhi? It's the best tool you got. I could give a wonderful lecture or a mediocre lecture, and it's not a good tool. The best tool you have is your afflictions. I'm sorry. Not my afflictions, because I could give you mine and they'd be worthless to you. And you could give me yours and they'd be worthless to me. The only ones that count are the ones that you have. Your precious little afflictions. My precious little afflictions. These are the tools of bodhi. Where does bodhi come from? Right through afflictions. Not from, and that's why he says, looking for it outside of this world or outside of your world or outside of your being is like looking for a rabbit with her horns. Okay? So bodhi, it's like the emotions are the key. So one way you look at it is the negative emotions are keys that unlock the shackle that we put over our bodhi. So we've taken the bodhi, what he calls the free-flowing. If you want to use water, you can use the other way. The water is free-flowing, and we put these little dams. And these are our afflictions, are the klesha. And so all you do is you dissolve the dam. Okay? So in front of my house, there's a curb, a gutter. The leaves come down, and the debris clog that gutter. And if I don't go and take those leaves out of there, untangle that mess, the water will flow over into my garage, into my living room. I've always wanted a sunken living room with a pool, but not like that. Okay? So by taking that out, the water flows in the channel and it goes on. It's free-flowing. So every place we get stuck, that's klesha. Where our bodhi, thus being nature, is stuck is our particular negative emotions. So it's like, these are the good knowing advisors. These are the Kalyana Mitras. Say, no, Kalyana Mitras, Amitabha, Guan Yin. No, it's your afflictions. And whatever they look like, that's who they are. Anger looks like this, that's your good knowing advisor. Meanness, shame, they all have different faces. Those are your good knowing advisors. Get to know them, welcome them, embrace them, say thank you, you've come, because without you, I can't get enlightened. In other words, when they're turned around, they become Bodhi. If they're not turned around, they will continue to obstruct. And if you pretend they're gone, they'll obstruct even more. And if you blame somebody else, then you've added insult on top of injury, and it's just going to go on and on. So the interesting thing is, there's nothing mystical about this. What's the key to awakening? Your crap. Sorry. Your afflictions. That's the key of awakening. That's the good knowing advisor, because it's right on that space that the turning has to occur to reclaim, restore. It wasn't that way, it isn't that way originally, but we turn it into that. That's that dysfunction again. So one way I was thinking about it, if you think about a rope, and let's say I'm doing a raft now. I'm not doing a raft, I'm doing a rope. This is the parable of the rope. I just made it up. It's not a Buddhist parable. Okay? So you're on one shore, right? And this shore is troubled and has lots of snakes and vipers and all this sort of thing. And then there's the other shore, which is like paradise, and you want to get from this shore to the other shore, and there's this raging water in between. Okay? And there is no raft, there is no twigs, but you got a rope. And interestingly enough, the rope is the perfect length you need to stretch it from one side to the other. Great! But then you find out there's knots in the rope. Damn. And by having knots in the rope is shortened, and you can't get to the other shore. So, what do? Cut the knots out. Duh! Won't work, right? Because the rope's the only thing you got to get to the other shore. Untie the knots, and you lengthen the rope a little more. Untie another one, you lengthen the rope a little more, and pretty soon it reaches to the other shore. Okay, so I'm basing on a parable of the raft with the rope. The knots are the afflictions, the negative emotions. You cannot cut them out, even as frustrating. And some of them are tied really well. Some of us are Eagle Scouts when it comes to making afflictions. We do not make mediocre ones. We do not make ones that are loosely. We make ones that are solid adamantine, vajra, diamond-like afflictions. And you go ahead. Nah, you're not going to touch my afflictions. Bullets bounce off it. Well, it's just more work you got to do. More pressure, more heat. So you untie the knot, pretty soon the rope reaches to the other shore. So I guess on the emotions, what I'm saying is don't be afraid of them, don't deny them, and don't guilt trip yourself over them. Basically these are the Buddhas of your nature who are just a little confused. It says the Buddha, a Buddha confused is a living being unconfused is a Buddha. This is the non-duality again. So there's no Bodhi without untying the knots of afflictions. And what's interesting, what's really good about this is it's so existential and subjective. It's like, well, let's see, what's the list? You don't have to go. You don't even have to memorize them. Where are you afflicted? Huh? No, that's the only thing that counts. Somebody else's afflictions only count when you're a good knowing advisor and you get rid of your own and you want to help them. Before that, it's not going to work. So you untie your own. So, brief answer. Let me end with a poem, because I thought of this. This is not a Buddhist poem, but I think it's very Buddhist in its flavor. And it's from a Persian poet called Rumi. I don't know when Rumi's time was. Rumi's very old. Maybe about the time of the Sixth Patriarch, for all I know. Anyhow, another night. But he's got this wonderful poem. Let me read it to you in short, because I think it expresses really the essence of this passage tonight, but also what we're talking about is the emotions and bodhi and afflictions. He says, I'll read it slowly, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond." Now, we could change the Buddhist flavor of this. Be grateful for whatever affliction comes, because each has been sent from a guide from within. So his take on this is to embrace these things because these are guides to one's spiritual nature and liberation. But in the same sense, you could just say the guest house is this body, and the guests that are coming are the dusts of our own afflictions. And you welcome them, you embrace them, you laugh, because each one is a guide, a good knowing advisor to your true nature. In fact, these guests are the guests of your own making. You've invited them. So anyhow, I end with Rumi's poem tonight. And next week, we will start a new chapter called City Meditation. I just want to point out to you, it's not something wrong with the book. There's only one page. There's only one page on city meditation. Wait, what happened? No, they didn't cut anything out. So what are we to make of that? We'll see next time. Any announcements? Questions? The Guanyin session that was taking place is just about over.
Yes, we have an announcement. We would like to share with you that our annual Dharma/meditation retreat in Oregon will take place July 10th to 16th. And the registration website is now ready for your registration. The site is oregon.berkeleymonastery.org. And if you have any questions about the retreat, come talk to me later on.
How many people went to some of the Guanyin? All of the Guanyin, some of the Guanyin. Does that mean if I said all of the Guanyin, you go this, some of the Guanyin didn't go? So, and it was, yes.
I also have a quick announcement. Next Saturday, there's a food demo here. And
Food demo.
yes, the same one from last week, but it'll be on.
Sauerkraut again?
Nope. You're making on your own sourdough starter yeast.
Sourdough. Okay. How was the Guanyin?
Very good, actually.
Very good.
Yeah, we have a lot of newcomers and some young and old Westerners.
No.
So you can clearly see it. And then the class, the hours had in the, it went very well. Even now we have almost like 40 people in the class. Ask a lot of good questions. So you can feel a very positive energy.
Mm-hmm. Wally, good? You agree with him? Huh? I'm sorry. Yihuan, you agree with him?
No, everything you say is okay.
It's okay.
No, Marty, you have an announcement. You're going to teach us Tai Chi next week. Right?
Oh, that's right.
Can you
Oh,
give
that.
us some preview?
Ouch. Owie. Ooh. No, I'm just gonna. They brought me out of mothballs to do Tai Chi again, so I haven't done it. So I'm gonna do it up at the city on Monday nights. Start up a class. But you know, it's Tai Chi or yoga are very, very good complements, what we call aids to the way, because in fact, when you say thought, you are cultivating the whole spectrum of mind and body, and not just some mind-body split. So cultivating the body through these ancient exercises are complementary to opening up and liberating and using the mind. And so meditation, your sitting meditation, can be very much advanced by a complementary practice like this, because essentially there's still meditation and moving meditation, and yoga and Tai Chi are like a moving meditation form. And it's particularly suited for people who are a little restless, who can't sit for long, so you can do the moving meditation. But the focus and concentration you do when you're doing it is the same as sitting meditation. So by doing that, it opens up all the neural pathways and the subtle neurotransmitters pathways, and all this is really activated by this. But I'm teaching a very traditional form. Involves a lot of stretching, some basic exercises, and takes a while to learn. But that's it. That's the announcement. Are you going to come? Yes. Oh, okay. How was the Guanyin? Oh, that's the silence of Vimalakirti. We'll stop at that. Okay, let's do the transference. May every living being as one and radiant with light. Share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding li san bao.